You hear it before you see it, a sound that doesn't belong in marble halls where emperors walk. A low animal moan rising from behind gilded doors, building into something that makes the Praetorian guards standing watch turn their faces away. Inside that chamber, the most powerful man in the known world is destroying himself from the inside out. His hands clutch at silk sheets stained dark with sweat and worse things. His abdomen has swollen to grotesque proportions. Skin stretched translucent over something that shouldn't exist inside a living body. And this is only day 12. He has 28 more to go. Before we go any further, drop a comment and let me know where you're watching from. It genuinely amazes me that a story this dark, from so long ago, can reach screens across the entire world. This is Sirmium, in the province of Pannonia. In the year 270 AD, the man dying in that room is Marcus Aurelius Claudius. Called Gothicus, conqueror of Gothic hordes, savior of a crumbling empire. A soldier emperor who led from the front and shared his men's rations. Just months ago, he stood on a battlefield strewn with 50,000 barbarian dead and earned Rome's gratitude. Now he cannot perform the most basic human function. His bowels have stopped completely, and what begins as a painful inconvenience will escalate into one of the most horrifying medical catastrophes ever recorded in Roman history. The physician kneeling beside the imperial bed is named Julius Callistus. He's treated battlefield amputations, plague victims. Poisoning's 30 years of practice have hardened him to suffering. But when he places his hands on the emperor's abdomen and feels what's happening beneath the skin, something cold moves through his chest. This isn't constipation. This is something else entirely. The tissue is rigid, distended, hot to the touch. And it's only been a week. Claudius had returned from the Balkans in August, exhausted but victorious. The Gothic invasion had been crushed at the Battle of Necessa, slaughter so complete that historians would call it one of the most decisive Roman victories of the century. But the campaign had cost him months of marching through hostile territory, drinking contaminated water, eating whatever could be foraged. He'd suffered alongside his legionaries, refusing special treatment even when his officers urged him to rest. The digestive troubles started during the march cramps, irregular movements, nothing alarming, just the price of command. Back in Sirmium, those troubles didn't fade. They intensified. Within days of his return, Claudius realized something was wrong. The discomfort became pain. The irregularity became absence. By the 5th day, Callistus was preparing purgative senna leaves, aloe-colocynth mixtures powerful enough to move a siege engine. The emperor drank them without complaint. Nothing happened. The physician tried olive oil infusions next, having Claudius consume quantities that should have lubricated every inch of intestinal tract. Still nothing. The material inside him wasn't moving. It was accumulating, compacting, hardening into something resembling stone. On day 8, Callistus attempted manual extraction, a procedure so invasive and agonizing that 2 servants had to hold the emperor's legs while a third gripped his shoulders. The physician worked with oils and bronze instruments, trying to reach the blockage, clear any passage he could find. Claudius screamed until his voice broke. And when Callistus finally withdrew, Defeated and shaking, he'd accomplished nothing except adding another layer of trauma to an already impossible situation. Here's what the palace doesn't understand yet. The human body can only contain so much. When waste stops moving, it doesn't simply wait politely for evacuation. It begins to ferment, to produce gases, to swell the intestines beyond their design capacity. The tissue starts to necrotize, dying while still inside a living host. Accumulate in the bloodstream instead. And the pressure builds, relentlessly, day after day after day. By the second week, Claudius can no longer eat solid food. Everything he swallows encounters a system already packed beyond capacity, backing up until he vomits it out hours later. His diet reduces to thin broth and wine, barely enough to sustain life. His body begins cannibalizing itself for energy. Muscle wasting from his arms and legs, even as his abdomen continues its grotesque expansion. He looks increasingly like something from a nightmare. Skeletal limbs attached to a torso swollen, as if pregnant with something monstrous. The smell begins on day 15. It seeps from the imperial chambers, despite incense burners positioned throughout the corridors of suite. Rotten odor that makes servants gag and Praetorian guards request reassignment. It's the smell of tissue decomposing inside a living body, of bacterial colonies flourishing in conditions they were never meant to inhabit. The emperor's breath carries it. His sweat reeks of it. There's no escaping what's happening to him. Callistus calls for consultations. Physicians arrive from across the province, each bringing theories and treatments. One performs bloodletting, draining the emperor's already depleted veins in hopes of rebalancing his humors. Another conducts elaborate rituals, burning sacrifices to Asclepius while chanting prayers that echo uselessly off marble walls. A surgeon named Diocles examines Claudius and proposes cutting into the abdomen, directly manual removal of the obstruction through surgical intervention. The room falls silent at this suggestion. Abdominal surgery in 270 AD is effectively a death sentence. Without anesthesia beyond opium, without antiseptic technique, without antibiotics. The procedure would be torture, followed by fatal infection. Claudius, in a moment of terrible clarity, refuses. He won't die on a surgeon's table. He'll endure. But endurance has limits, and Claudius is discovering where those limits lie. By day 20, the pain has transcended anything he experienced on battlefields. It comes in waves, cramping, so intense his entire body convulses. Periods where his back arches off the bed, despite attendants trying to hold him still. Between the waves, there's only a grinding, relentless pressure, as if some invisible force is trying to split him open from within. Opium provides brief respites, but the doses required to dull the pain also fog his mind. And the emperor drifts between consciousness and delirium, sometimes addressing senators who aren't present, sometimes commanding cavalry charges against enemies only he can see. His wife keeps vigil beside the bed. Ancient sources don't preserve her name. History cared more about emperors than their wives, but the accounts describe her devotion. She holds his hand during the worst spasms. She wipes fever sweat from his forehead. she watches the man she married disappear into this thing that's taking over his body, and there's nothing she can do except bear witness to his disintegration. Around day 25, Claudius begins vomiting fecal matter. The obstruction is so complete that the only path for intestinal contents is upward. This development horrifies even the physicians who thought they'd seen everything. The emperor's body has reversed its most basic functions. What should exit below now erupts from his mouth dark, stinking material that leaves him gasping and retching between episodes. Servants assigned to clean up these incidents have to be threatened with punishment to enter the room. Some flee their posts entirely, preferring unemployment to enduring what they've witnessed. The Praetorian Guard prepares for succession. Their prefect, Flavius, meets quietly with senior commanders, trying to forge consensus on who'll take the purple when Claudius finally dies, because there's no question now of recovery. The only question is how much longer this can possibly continue. Medical knowledge suggests days a week at most. But Claudius exceeds every prediction, his body refusing to surrender even as it destroys itself cell by cell. Day 30 brings new horrors. The emperor's skin takes on a yellow-cast jaundice from liver failure as toxins overwhelm his system. His urine, the little he produces, runs dark as rust. His extremities grow cold, fingers and toes turning bluish as circulation fails, yet his heart keeps beating. His lungs keep drawing breath, and the pressure in his abdomen keeps building. Callistus can feel the intestines shifting under the skin now. What should be held in place by mesentery, the membrane supporting abdominal organs, has loosened, loops of bowel moving in ways that shouldn't be possible. The physician realizes the intestinal walls have begun rupturing internally, that the architecture of the emperor's gut is collapsing. But the outer abdominal wall remains intact, containing everything, holding it all inside like a dam under impossible strain. The chamber becomes a place of constant vigil. Attendants rotate shifts because no one can endure extended exposure to what's happening inside those walls. The sounds alone Claudius's breathing has become a wet, labored rattle, punctuated by moans and occasional screams when the pain spikes beyond even opium's ability to mask. The air feels heavy, oppressive, as if the room itself has become infected by the emperor's condition. On day 37, Claudius opens his eyes with unexpected clarity. The opium fog lifts for just a moment, and he looks at the people around him, really looks at them, seeing them as individuals rather than shadows in his delirium. His lips move. Those closest lean in to hear. "Let me die," he whispers. "Please, let me die." But they can't grant that mercy. Roman medicine has no concept of euthanasia for the terminally suffering. All they can do is continue the opium, continue the prayers, continue watching as nature takes its brutal course. The 39th day passes in a fever that spikes beyond anything previously recorded. Claudius's temperature climbs so high his skin radiates heat like sun-baked stone. His eyes seem to bulge from their sockets. Thin streams of blood seep from his nose and ears as delicate vessels rupture under the combined assault of fever and pressure. Around sunset, something shifts visibly in his abdomen, a grotesque asymmetry as internal structures give way completely. The 40th day begins before dawn. In the pre-dawn darkness, lit by oil lamps casting shadows that seem to writhe on the walls, Claudius lies gasping. His chest heaves irregularly. His mouth hangs open as he fights for air. His compressed diaphragm can barely draw in. Everyone present knows this is the end. The question isn't if, but how. Around 4 in the morning, Claudius's eyes fly open. There's something terrible in that gaze of final, lucid awareness that something is about to happen. His body goes rigid. Every muscle locks simultaneously. His mouth opens in a scream that builds from somewhere deep and primal, a sound that echoes through the palace and sends guards in distant corridors reaching for their weapons. And then his abdomen ruptures. The skin simply tears a wet, ripping sound as tissue stretched beyond all tolerance finally gives way. The opening runs from sternum to pelvis, and what emerges is everything that 40 days of obstruction has created. Blood, bile, fecal matter in various states of decay, necrotic tissue that should never have seen light, fluids that defy identification. The volume is staggering gallons of material flooding onto the bed, onto the floor, releasing a concentrated stench that drives half the room's occupants into the corridor where they vomit helplessly. Claudius is still alive when it happens. His eyes are open, his hands twitch. For perhaps 30 seconds, maybe a full minute, he remains conscious aware that his body has literally exploded, that his intestines are now external. Then his eyes glaze. His breathing stops. Marcus Aurelius Claudius Gothicus, conqueror of Goths, Emperor of Rome, dies at approximately 4:25 a.m. on the 40th day. The aftermath is chaos. The body cannot be displayed. Imperial tradition demands a lying in state, but Claudius's corpse is beyond any restoration. Officials quickly decide on a cover story: plague. The emperor died of plague, which explains the hasty burial, the sealed coffin, the lack of public viewing. The chamber itself is sealed immediately and never used again. Despite attempts at cleaning, the smell persists, soaking into marble, and the room becomes forbidden space, too tainted by horror to serve any purpose. But the truth spreads anyway. Too many people witness too much. Servants talk to families. Guards gossip with fellow soldiers. Within weeks, the story circulates through Sirmium, then beyond, carried along trade routes and military supply lines, growing more elaborate with each retelling until it becomes legend. The emperor who exploded. The man who died from constipation. The warrior defeated not by enemies, but by his own intestines. Historians struggle with how to record it. Most official accounts cite plague, avoiding the grotesque truth. But medical texts preserve Callistus's detailed notes. Physicians study the case for centuries, trying to understand the cascade of failures that transformed simple constipation into fatal catastrophe. The case becomes cautionary tale and nightmare both, a reminder that beneath all power and glory, we remain vulnerable bodies, subject to failure in ways both mundane and monstrous. In the end, Claudius's death transcends mere medical horror to become something almost philosophical. Here was a man who conquered armies, who stood at civilization's pinnacle, who commanded legions and shaped history. And he was destroyed by a malfunctioning bowel. All his victories, all his power, all Rome's wealth and knowledge couldn't save him from a condition that modern emergency rooms treat routinely. The chamber where he died still stands in ruins, sealed for 17 centuries now. Sometimes, locals claim you can still hear echoes on certain night screams from someone enduring what no human should have to endure. Whether that's truth or legend doesn't really matter, 'cause the story itself echoes regardless. A reminder that we're all just flesh and blood, that even emperors are mortal, and that sometimes the body becomes a prison from which there is no escape except the one that finally came for Claudius on that 40th morning.